Hi guys, welcome. So welcome to the Big Data Project Workflow, a free webinar. So we'll be discussing in this project certain important things. Let's get started. First, let me introduce you about myself. Myself, Naveen. I'm having close to 12 years of experience in IT. At the moment, I work for Cisco. I basically work as an architect in Cisco. And my entire 10 years of experience, I'm into the big data engineering. So I started my first project in big data. So at the moment, I work as an architect in Cisco, and I basically work for data engineering, and I'm a data scientist. So my primary responsible is I'm a hardcore Java developer. So at the moment, as I told you, since I'm working on data science, I have to be, I'll be most of the time involved into the machine building the models, and then, most of the time, preparing the exploratory data analysis. But if not, if I'm a hardcore Java developer. So this is just brief about myself. So at any time you can feel free to contact me. I will be sharing you the contact details once we finish this webinar. Okay, let's get started, guys. So let's discuss about what we are going to discuss on this particular webinar. So the first topic what we are going to take is we are going to discuss about end-to-end project workflow. Very important. So in this project workflow, I will be showing you in general what kind of questions candidates try to in interview they will try to ask you, and what kind of an answers you have to give, and what kind of things you should actually put in your resume. All those things we'll be discussing in the project workflow, and we will also be discussing what technologies are involved while building this kind of a project. So this is one real project, project architect, what we were working on earlier. So I'll be showing you the similar, obviously with slight tweak. And we will finally get into the project demo. In project demo, what I really wanted to show you here is I want to show you some proof of concepts here. Many people are, when we generally go for interview, they will really ask you that, can you show me what are the proof of concepts, or can you show me the real-time data that you were using? Can you tell me some of the columns you were actually using in as part of your project? Those kind of questions is a very common questions, in general what they ask you. So I will help you out to answer those kind of questions when I start explaining about the proof of concepts, and during the project I'll keep will keep engaged in asking different questions. And you can always raise hand, that if you have any questions, you can simply raise hand. And then finally we'll take up the question and answers, so that if you have any questions in mind, if based on my experience, if I can answer, if it is in my scope, I will help you out. Okay, let's get started, guys. So first thing, let me discuss about the project workflow. Very important. Let's get started. Now, this is the project workflow in general, what we call it as a data pipeline architecture. Let me discuss about this project in detail. This project can be applicable for any kind of a domain. Now, please look at this one important thing here to remember. In a typical data pipeline, typical data pipeline architecture, you will have different sources of your data. Now, if you look into this, we have different sources of your data. Now, since I work in a telecom domain, we get different sources of data like voice, voice over LTE. We get different sources like SMS. Now, for example, since I work in a telecom domain, we know that the source of the data is the network elements. That means if you're aware that everybody is having a mobile phone, and when you switch on your mobile, or when you try to call up, the signal will actually gets connected to a towers. So hope everybody knows. These are in general, we call it as BTS towers. So these are network elements. So when you generally make a call, what happens is the signal gets connected to the network elements. Now, in these network elements, what we would have generally done is we would have installed some set of softwares which actually sniffs the data. So that means you make a call when, it's not just about making a call. When you try to, for example, you try to connect to the 3G network, you try to connect to the 4G network. What happens? Your mobile phone gets connected to the network elements. So when your mobile phone gets connected to the network elements, what we do is we try to sniff the data. This is what we call it as events. That means any activity you do, for example, you tried making a call to your friend, and you're trying to roam. For example, you're trying to go from one place to another place. So what happens is your signal tries to latch to a different network element. So what happens when the signal latches, when your connectivity, when the signal latches to a different network element, what happens is there will be an event which gets generated. All these events we will be capturing at real time. This is very important. For example, think about a scenario. You have connected with 2G and you have connected on 2G, and all of a sudden, you got a good network, your signal got more strength, and your mobile phone got connected with 3G. That means an event gets generated. Again, when you go from 3G to a place where there is good strength of 4G network, again an event gets generated. These are all called events. These are the live events which keeps generating every single action you make to your mobile phone. For example, you have tried making a call, and let's say you're in Karnataka, and while making a call, all of a sudden you went to a different part of the state. For example, you were in Karnataka. During the call, you went to for example, Andhra Pradesh. Now what happens is the billing will vary because you are a roaming customer now. So when you are in Karnataka, the amount of billing will vary when you are in not from Karnataka. So what we do, we capture real-time events, including your location information. So it also tells you that we also do a lot of device data analysis, which tells you what is the amount of call usage made on a particular region. So we also do a lot of device data analysis. For example, if you take up another use case, I'm sorry, if you take up another use case, we also do a lot of data analysis, which tells you that look at this, as a telecom operator, I'm interested, for example, I want to find out which are the top 10 regions where there is, we are getting more calls which are not part of the standard cell phones. We also do a lot of analysis on this. Show me the top 10 regions where there are more calls, which is not part of the standard devices, which is not part of the standard manufacturing devices. So we do a lot of the security things. Now, if you take up the use cases, we have several use cases related to the browsing. We have several use cases related to the voice data analysis. Obviously, we have several use cases related to this COVID situations. We have a lot of use cases which is built. So on every use case, what we build, we will have a source associated with it. So each source sends the data. That data is what we call it as an event. This is very important. So if an interview, if they ask you, can you tell me what is a source? You should always be prepared that you should also be very confident to figure it out what should be your source. In my case, the source is the network elements, where we would have installed some predefined set of softwares which actually captures the events and then gives into your different pipeline architecture. Right? Any single question here before I proceed? You can raise hand so that I can help you out. If you have any single question, please feel free to raise hand so that I can help you out more with that. Yeah, Babu, go ahead. Yeah, Babu, go ahead. I think you've raised your hand. Okay, I think Babu. Okay. Any other people who have question? Okay, let me proceed. Okay, so all this live data is what we call it as an event. Now, yeah, Hemant, go ahead.
So, Naveen, one thing that I would like to ask is, when you have talked about these sources for both SMS and voice. So, what is exactly the format that you receive it in?
Right, very good. Now let me discuss about that.
Exactly, and where exactly that data is picked up from. So, for example, in streams, we can have normally we have this MQ message queue.
Okay, I understood your point. I'll answer your point, Hemant.
Add something on that. Sure.
No problem. Okay. Shall I answer your point?
Sure.
Okay. Now, for example, as I told you that in our case on the network elements, we would have installed some sort of a software which actually takes the data, sniffs the data, and all those events will be generated into a directory in the form of zeros and ones and zeros, basically decimals. which will be encrypted. It will not be a character-based data. Okay. Now you will have a mediation layer, Hemant. You will have a mediation layer. What this mediation layer will do, will try to take the data which is encrypted and will convert into a character-based data. The reason is when the data is character-based, then only we can analyze the data. Correct. So what this mediation layer will do is will try to convert this encrypted data, what you get from the network elements. In general, it will be zeros and ones and zeros, which is in decimals. So this mediation layer will try to convert based on the specification. It tries to know that this particular. Guys, kindly go yourself on mute, please. Okay, so it tries to take the decimal data, and this mediation layer converts into the character-based data, and then it will be sent to a different channels. So you can assume this voice is a directory where this mediation layer puts the data into this directory. Hemant, is that clear, Hemant?
Okay, so this means it's a kind of a file server or
yes,
some kind of a disk storage.
Yes,
wherein all these binary stream is being put in.
Yes, it can be a network file system, which is actually a shareable file system, or it can be a proprietary location where, which can't be accessible just like a normal file read. With a lot of, with securities, should be able to access. Yes, to answer your point, in precise, it will be a files.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good question. I would request everybody to ask questions, then only it will help you to really make use the session to the maximum. Yeah, Vamsi, any questions here, Vamsi?
Yes, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Vamsi.
So this processing is a real data stream processing, right? So this happens in a real time, like you are calculating the roaming and all. This is all real time processing, right?
Okay. Vamsi, this is very important, Vamsi. You will have several use cases which is not always real time. This is very important. But the events what you get generated will be a micro batch, which almost you can say it is real time. But not all the data is required for us to perform real time analytics. Vamsi.
Okay.
For example, we have several use cases. I will tell you about the real-time analytics where we exactly do. We have certain real-time analytics which tells you that if in a particular cell, or to make it more simple, in a particular area, if the number of call drop happens beyond a certain threshold, raise alarms. So this is a real-time, we define real-time KPIs to snip the data on real time, and then we, based on if a particular threshold is reached within a certain time, then we will have a notification systems which will actually send notifications to different subscribers. So it purely depends on what kind of a use case. So you can build either the batch processing as well as the real-time processing.
Okay, and one more question is that you have told that we will convert the binary data into character data, right?
Right.
So character data means JSON format.
The character means it's a
Avro format, just
text,
only text format.
Right.
But if you see that if you use JSON format or else Avro format,
no, still we have not gone to that level. This is still we are in the source. Avro, all those things comes into the data warehousing infrastructure there.
Okay.
We have not gone to, we have not gone there still.
Okay. So this type of processing is also can be done in mainframes, right?
Okay. However, I can't answer you on mainframes because I've not worked on mainframes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because there are many telecommunication companies that works.
Yeah, maybe, but yeah, I have not worked at least.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, good question. Okay, let me proceed now. Right. So I think let me proceed now. So we get data to different from different sources. For example, voice, VoLTE. We get data. These are all network elements in telecom, SDSN, and LTE. These are all different sources of the data. Now, once you get these different sources of data based on usage, the data will be collected for certain duration of time. Now, if you look into this architecture, now if you look into this is one typical data pipeline architecture. What happens is the data will undergo a lot of stages now. So in general, the first stage, what happens in general is the data has to be given for some sort of a streaming applications. Now, before data sent to the streaming applications, do understand, you can see one kind of an architecture where I use the data will be taken from our directories through Kafka connectors. So if you look into this, we have something called as source connectors, and we may also have something called as sink connectors. That means between the source connector and sink connectors, there can be a lot of transformation happening. I will tell you those things. So what the source connectors will do is, for example, the source connectors will try to, whatever data you get it into the directory, each folder will be a timestamp associated. Very important. Each folder in general, what happens, will have a timestamp associated. Okay, that is a unique timestamp, an epoch time. So the source connector basically reads the data. When it tries to read the data and then actually sends it to the Kafka, there can also be a lot of transformation happening on the source connector. For example, you are expecting, since you're doing, let's say you're doing a device data analysis, you may get all the fields associated for device, but you did not get the device name, for example. So now the source connectors, you have a lot of features where, we write the source connector, which reads the data from this directory, parses every record by record, and based on the rules, whatever we have defined, we will have certain rules defined for each kind of a source. For example, if I'm talking about the source for voice, and if I'm talking about in particular device, we would have had certain rules defined for each source. That means you will have several sources. So Kafka source connector for voice is different. Kafka source connector for OLTE is different. Kafka source connector for SMS is different. So you'll have multiple source connectors which actually connects to different sources here. So in the source connectors, based on the type of a source, we would have actually written certain rules telling that what are the validation should take place as part of the source connector. For one example of the validation, is that, for example, a particular device is required since we are doing device data analysis. So device name is actually required. Now, for example, there can be situations wherein the device name was not able to generate by the network element. It could be the reason that device is not a standard device, which is given by the, which is not a standard device. That means which is not a registered device. So you know that if the device is not registered, you get a lot of devices which is not registered at all. All the China devices, most of the China devices, which you get it for very, very less prices, we get, it's not registered. So still we get, we can make a calls out of that data. So now if the data you're getting where device name is not registered, that means it is not there as part of our dimension data. I will come back to this dimension data. So those records has to be treated, especially when compared to other data, because absolutely no point me giving an analysis to the end user about the devices which is not part of the standard devices. So as a telecom operator, I will not be interested in knowing about devices which is not part of the standard devices. I can't make any decisions out of that particular devices. So these kind of records will actually not be loaded into the your data lakes or your data warehousing infrastructure. These records will be eventually rejected, or it will be archived for further analysis. Okay, right. Any questions here, guys? So that everybody is in sync. Any question here? Okay. Okay, I see there's no questions. Let me proceed. So as I told you that you will have several source connectors and you will have several sink connectors. That means as part of the architecture, if you look into one of the architecture, what we have, we don't have this kind of a structured streaming at all. We don't have a streaming application at all. In our architecture, what we have is, one second. In our architecture, one of the architecture, what we have is, we have a source connector, and we have a sink connector. Simple. We don't have anywhere streaming built on top of it. This is Kafka. So the source connectors, which simply takes the data from, let's say, a directory, and it performs certain ETLs there, and then it sends to the sink connectors, and we have a lot of sink connectors which automatically sends the data to HDFS. So here, if you look into this, we have not built a streaming here. So we have several use cases where streaming is not required. Okay. Yeah, Nalini, go ahead. I think Nalini, I think you have raised your hand. Okay, I'm not sure. Okay, any questions from anybody? Let's keep it interactive, guys. So if you have any questions, you can ask me. Let's wait for 1 minute. Okay. Okay, right. I see there's no questions. Let me proceed. So in this architecture, if you see, as I told you, we have source connectors. So this source connectors basically, the source connector basically sends the messages to the Kafka. Okay. Again, Kafka, everybody knows how I would expect Kafka is basically a distributed message queuing system. So before the data gets injected into the data warehousing, it is mandatory that you store the messages into the Kafka for various reasons. For example, Kafka provides you a lot of techniques where if this particular destination system, if it is not able to consume the message, still the messages will be relied on your Kafka. This Kafka, people who are from Java, MSMQ you can have, or you have different things what we used to do in the Java, but nowadays most of the people tend to use Kafka. Okay, now let me just tell you. So as I told you that we have different sources, this data will be taken to the Kafka connectors. This is one architecture, and if you see, there's another set of architecture here. So what these connectors will do, you have different connectors. For example, you have ready-made connectors available. For example, if you want to connect to databases like Oracle. Let's assume your source system is sending the data to the Oracle or any form of a database where you simply want to fetch the data and simply wants to put it into Kafka. You get a lot of source connectors. So on the source connectors, as I told you that we based on the rules defined based on the source level, we perform a lot of ETL. So this is very important. We do a lot of ETL. I'll come back to this again. So the data will be sent to the Kafka. And then you can have a different streaming applications. Please look at this. Now, the reason I've specifically mentioned that it is about Spark structured streaming, you can use several streaming platforms. Olden days, at least in the almost like 6-7 years, we used to use something called as Apache Storm. Look at the evolution of the technology. This is very important interview question. They will ask you in interview, can you tell me how did your technology evolve? So you have to know about all these things. We used to use a component by name Apache Storm. And then, people migrated to what we call it as Spark streaming. Spark streaming, but at the moment, people don't use Spark streaming anymore. People tend to use either structured streaming or Kafka comes with its own streams. So they also use Kafka streams. Yeah, people may also use Flink, but we also evaluated using Flink, but we did not choose Flink. The reason we did not choose Flink, not just with terms of it was better, it is because lack of documentation. This is very important. They will ask you in interview, why you didn't choose a particular technology. For in our case, we did not choose Flink. The reason is there was lack of documentation for Flink when compared to Spark. So we evolved from Apache Storm, and then we started using something called as Spark structured streaming. So, and again, we are doing a lot of POCs on Kafka streams. We use of KQL. There's a lot of side projects which are going on to evaluate different streaming things. So any questions here, guys, before I proceed? Let's keep it interactive, guys. Any questions here? Yeah, Hemant, you have to just raise your hand. I will help you out to unmute. Please don't don't unmute yourself, Hemant. Who is that? Yeah, Hemant, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, now you are talking about these all separate tools as such. Have you guys considered cloud as a platform? Because all these could be used as a services.
Definitely.
So did you guys give a thought about it?
Okay, now one thing, the reason why we didn't choose, we also have a cloud deployments, but most of the deployment happens on the in-premises. The reason why we have chosen in-premises deployment is the data what we have is more secure data. I mean to say the telecom data, especially for most of the use cases, the customers will have their own physical data centers where they would have already purchased the hardwares and the project would be running since ages. Right, Hemant? And all of a sudden migrating the complete projects, even though the cloud provides you solutions, all of a sudden migrating the projects and keeping the data on the cloud is little, they will not be, they'll be slightly reluctant to keep their data on the cloud. So even now, most of the deployments what we have is in-premises deployment. That means on a physical cluster, which is, we have one of the deployment, I'm sorry, who's that? We have one of the deployment, who's that? Who were asking? Whom I was pointing? Sorry, who was that? Okay, I think we lost him. So we also have certain deployments where, the deployment happens on, countries like Nigeria with fully guarded. So you'll have physical data centers on a thick forest. So, we'll be going, the deployment units will be going there and then, we'll be deploying. Yes, there's no doubt that, you can also go ahead with cloud, but again, it depends on the customer to customer, their investment, all those different things. Clear? Clear, Hemant? I'm not sure whether you're there. Okay.
Yes, yeah, that's fine.
Right, Hemant? And just you mentioned a good point, Hemant. We also have one of the use case, Hemant, where the cluster resource is required only for 2-3 hours, Hemant. So at that point of time, what we do is we ship the data to the cloud and then we spawn up a cluster at a runtime. Every day we spawn up at 3 o'clock, and then after analyzing the previous data, we destroy the resources. So we also have that kind of a deployment, Hemant. Again, we lost it.
Okay.
Okay. So yes, definitely you can use, no doubt about that. But however, if companies have already invested into the hardwares and, investing on the hardware, I did not pay to anybody. Every time the jobs keeps running and I have infrastructure where I can scale. And customers are not willing to keep their data onto the cloud because of so many security reasons. Hemant.
Okay, got it. And just one more thing, I'll take it very quickly, because then there was a mention about source and sync when you were talking about these Kafka streams. But then what was the sync that was used? I mean, what
we
was
use
the data
Kafka sync
stored?
connectors.
Okay.
Right, Hemant?
I do not know much about Kafka.
Right.
So
now you can go ahead and look. You have something called as Kafka source connectors and you have something called as sync connectors. Okay, right. Yeah. Any other questions from anybody, guys?
Is it source connectors are predefined, or else we need to develop a code for that?
Very good. We have source connectors which we have developed in Spring Boot. These are the custom connectors what we have developed. However, you also get a lot of source connectors ready-made. Whoever asked me this question, who asked this question?
Myself, Abhishek, sir.
Right, Abhishek. Abhishek, you get a ready-made source connectors. If you just go to GitHub projects and if you search for Kafka source connectors to connect to a directory, you get a ready-made connectors available. However, we have used Spring Boot to develop these source connectors, Abhishek.
Yeah. Sir, one thing.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Instead of using Spark structure streaming, I mean, they gave an API for Kafka, right? So there itself we can manipulate, we can push the data, right? I mean,
see, one thing again, Abhishek, see, the entire thing of choosing a framework will not just be because of performance. It can also depends on, for example, while building these connectors, for example, this part of the layer, whatever I'm using, this till to the Kafka here, till here, for example, this is developed as part of one business. And this is developed as part of another business unit.
Okay.
So the decision making is not about what this uses. So it involves a lot of other things also, right, Abhishek?
Yeah, got it. I mean, my intention is like
I understand your intention. I understand your intention. But I'm trying to tell you that this they will ask you in interview. That is the reason I'm stressing on this, Abhishek. a lot of times, there will be a questions for us also, why you didn't evaluate about Flink. But to evaluate about the Flink, it is the company's decision, or it is about the projects, the flows they have defined it on already a particular technology. So we have to adhere to those things. Clear, Abhishek?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Right. I appreciate you for that question. Very good. Good, guys. I see many people asking. Please raise your hand if you have any questions so that I will know who is that. Please raise your hand if you have any questions.
Hi, this is Vijay. I have one question.
Yeah, Vijay. Vijay, next time I would request you to please raise hand there so that I will know who is asking. Yeah, Vijay, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, sure. So we are trying to develop the Kafka and all teams, right? What will be the case when a pure developer want to go into a development phase only? Like, I should need to know about all the all the technologies there, like, Spring Boot. If I'm a big data developer, I need not to be knowing about the Spring Boot, right? To develop the Kafka.
Vamsi, there is several ways to achieve a task, actually speaking. Now, for example, this pipeline architecture, for example, without knowing about the code, you can achieve. But for example, I want to sync up with different sources, and then I should make a decision of, sending the data to the Kafka. If I want to do that kind of a business logic, I can achieve with only through certain programmatic. Correct, Vamsi?
Yes.
For
Vijay
instance,
here,
so who asked this question?
Vijay.
Right. Sorry, Vijay. So Vijay, you understood my point. For example, think about a scenario that you get your voice data, but for me to push into the Kafka, I want to make a decision that some other source sends the data related to voice information, because I want to enrich my data by joining voice data and some other source. And then only have to write it to Kafka. At that time, I have to write my custom logic to send the data to the Kafka, Vijay.
Yeah.
So at that point of time, I can't simply rely on ready-made sources.
Oh, okay.
So at that point of time, do remember we have to write, and most of the times do understand we write a lot of custom connectors through at least Spring Boot. Right, Vijay?
Okay. Yeah, got it.
Right. I appreciate your question on that. Right. Yeah, Vamsi, go ahead.
Actually, there are, as you told, there are two types of connectors. There is one is a source connector and one is a sync connector.
Right.
So what you do is that you will write a configuration file, that is a properties file.
That's what I'm trying. That is the simple connectors, whatever you're trying to tell me.
Yeah. If you want to write a custom, you mean a custom, what you call custom, what you call a connector, then you can develop in Java also, right? Not apart from Bootstrap.
When I say Spring Boot, it is Java only, right, Vamsi?
Yeah, but in pure Java, you cannot develop that one.
See, anything can be developed with pure Java, but the whole point of using high-level APIs is it eases your development effort, right?
Okay.
So the entire companies is using applications like Spring Boot, libraries available in Spring Boot. It is always, it provides you a high-level API, which makes things faster. That is a point, right? Now, if you ask me a question, can you do it in Java? Definitely, yes, it's possible. But effort is more.
Okay.
Now,
because your APIs will come into picture because you have to invoke APIs.
Mandatory. No doubt about that.
Okay.
Right. Let me proceed, guys. Yeah, Arjun, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Naveen.
Hi, Arjun. Tell me.
Yeah, in place of Kafka, can we use any other alternative tool or?
Definitely you can use, but again, I'm trying to tell you, typical standard workflows, whatever I'm trying to tell you, that is what you will have. If you're working on a pure product-based companies, this is in general flow what you will have. Yes, if you ask me another sources, for example, I can replace this, for example, this all will become like, not a very efficient, but however people tend to use, for example, to take the data, they use Apache NiFi. It's all, comes with, you're bound to a tool. That is very important. So you can take a NiFi and then, you can simply send the data to the Kafka. Now there's no program involved here, but it comes with a lot of licensing costs and you're bound, technology is bound to a particular tool. Yes, definitely. I'm not stopping you. You can definitely do that. But as I told you that, I have a lot of custom logic, which I have to develop. So achieving the same thing with NiFi, it would be a little difficult.
Okay.
Okay. And moreover, if you ask developers to work with NiFi, they will not be comfortable because it is just a tool there. They'll not be interested. Okay. Right. Any more questions, guys, before we proceed? Okay, excellent, guys. Let me proceed, guys. So again, you may have a different workflows. Again, it's a here, if you see for one of the workflow, we have also used Kafka Producer API. Please look at this. We have made use of Kafka Producer API. That means we have not invested on your Kafka building your source or sync connectors. We simply make use of the Kafka Producer API, and we make use of Kafka Consumer API. You can also well go ahead and invest time on looking into this Producer and Consumer API. So while again in the Producer, we do a lot of the ETLs. I will show you one use case so that you will understand when I say ETL enriching the data by looking into the dimension. We have a lot of things there. So we do a lot of custom logic there. So you can also get into this flow as well. So now if you look into this flow here, can you see this? Before we write into the data warehousing, this is what we generally call it as a data warehouse or the data lake. So now if you look into this, before the either the Kafka consumer or your structured streaming, or it could be your sync connectors, before it writes the data, for example, you can assume this as Hadoop. Before it writes the Hadoop, as I told you, you will have a lot of data enrichment happening. You will have a lot of data enrichment happening here. So the data, kindly go yourself on mute, please. Bharat. Okay. Okay. So for example, if you look into this, we have a lot of data enrichment. What we do, for example, can you see this? We generally, whenever you are performing anything on huge volume of data and you want to perform some kinds of a lookup on your data. For example, let's say this particular data is given by the customer, is what in general we call it as dimension data. So this kind of a dimension data will be persisted into the memory. For example, let me give you an example. Let's assume, when you make a call, the data what you get, the raw data what you get, you will not have information telling which region or city you belong to. This is very important. It will not have any information which tells you which region or city it belongs to. For example, let me just take up one example so that you will understand what exactly you meant with data enrichment. Okay, let me just take up a notepad. Let me write it down here. Okay, so that you'll understand what is data enrichment. Let's assume a scenario, your raw data, the raw record what you get from the network, the raw data what I'm writing to write the raw data. So let's assume a raw data you have, for example, in the raw data, let's assume you may have cell. This is one column. Let's assume you may have LAC. This is one column. And let's say you may have MCC. These are all different, the column information. Let's say MNC. Let's assume these are all different column information. For example, let me take up some of the columns like MC, MS, ISDN. These are the real columns what we have. Now this is the raw data what you get from the network element. Now when the data gets transferred into the data warehousing system, the data enrichment happens. So in general, when I say data enrichment, there is a lot of ETL happening here. So you're trying to extract the data from the source and you're performing the transformation on the source. When I say transformation here, I'm trying to also say, I'm trying to enrich my data. When I say data enrichment means you may add additional fields to the data. For example, if you take up a simple example about when I talk about data enrichment, let's assume your raw data will have, let's assume you may have call start. And let's assume your data will have call end. So now as part of the data enrichment, the simplest data enrichment could be that in my destination systems requires call duration. My destination system requires call duration. No, don't you think out of these two records, I can compute this call duration, and rather than storing call duration and call end, call start and call end into my data warehousing, I will enrich my data by performing certain KPIs. I will compute certain KPIs. One such KPI is call duration. So I will do call end minus call start will give me the call duration. And then this call duration is what I will try to add it to my data warehouse. So I will try to reject these records. This is part of the enriching the data. So enriching the data is not just about adding a new column here. It is also about, adding, performing certain computations on the data, and then, you adding. For example, if you take up this information here, what I told you here, if you look into this information, you may have cell, LAC, MCC, MNC, MC, MSI, SDN. Now look at this. Customers can give certain data. That data is, in general, we call it as dimension data. Dimension data. So there can be a dimension data which is part of the product. There can be a dimension data which is part of customer giving. So in this dimension data, for example, let's assume you have information like IMSI. It's like a lookup table. Please understand, it is kind of a lookup table. IMSI, MSISDN, and given the IMSI, given the MSISDN, you have to perform a lookup where you can say that that particular customer belongs to which customer segment. For example, right, in telecom, each subscriber belongs to a customer segment. For example, a subscriber can belong to a bronze, so customer can belong to a silver. These are the customer segments. Okay. Or we also say that, for example, it also has certain subscription plan. Subscription plan, whether you are a postpaid customer or you're a prepaid customer. This information is what we the telecom operators try to give you. So given this raw data, when it goes as part of the data pipeline, data enrichment should happen. This data is given by the customer, and then the lookup should happen between this IMSI and MSISDN, and then it should give me the customer segment, and it should give me the subscriber, for example, subscription plan, whether it's a prepaid, postpaid, whatever it is. Based on that, when I write the data to the destination, I will have cell, LAC, MCC, MNC in place of IMSI and MSISDN. I may have additional information about customer segment and subscription plan. So these kind of a complex transformation we do on your raw data, right? Any single question here, guys? So this is what in general we call it as data enrichment. Yeah, Abhishek, go ahead.
Is it like as per you mentioned, so like segments, customer segments you mentioned, sir.
Mm-hmm.
It be upset you need to be happens or not?
Yes, it happens on the data. Okay. Before getting into the data warehousing, all these things happens. All performing your KPIs, enriching your data, all those things happen before we actually store the results into the data lakes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, right. I just gave you one example here that's all about enriching the data. There's a lot of things happens there.
I have a question. So like data enrichment can be done only from the existing column names, or how is it doing? In your example, you have shown like call start date minus end date will give you the duration. So if we have to add some more,
I gave you another example also. I think I'm not sure whether you were there. Based on the IMSI and based on the MSISDN, we were able to get that subscription plan and the customer segment, correct? So that is also part of the data enrichment, right?
Okay.
I'm not sure who is this Nalini keeps. Okay, right. Any other questions, guys? So all these things happens on this layer. That is why I'm trying to tell you all this information is many people, what we get resumes when we try to, especially people have undergone courses in different places, they fail to explain about the architecture. Do remember learning about Spark, learning about Kafka. It is not about, there's nothing great in that, but you have to understand the real, the data pipeline, how does the data flow? Can you explain me about your data pipeline architecture? It's very important. Okay. Yeah. Any questions before I proceed to the next one? Please raise your hand, guys. Yeah, Hemant, go ahead.
Yeah, Naveen, one question. Usually when we talk about, I'm just considering the context we take it into the data warehousing. Mm-hmm. Normally when we have to combine or do the data enrichment, we have to ensure that the rest of the data which we need to combine with is also updated at that point of time.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
So,
that is the reason we frequently load this dimension data. If the customer doesn't load this dimension data very frequently, the entire analysis will go for a wrong. And there can be a lot of records rejected. For example, for an instance, if you take, for one of the customer, for example, let's say MSCSDN is like a mobile number. Now, don't you think, Hemant, that, every day people joins the network and people leaves the network? Do you accept, Hemant?
Right.
So for example, right. So for example, if the dimension data is not uploaded very frequently, let's assume, a particular mobile number 95, for example, if particular mobile number is not updated into the dimension data, but your real-time data gets 95. So what happens is either the record will be rejected or the record will be marked as null in source or unknown, whatever the default your product takes the decision.
Actually, what I wanted to ask was, so you have these data streams, right? So that is more like a real-time data that is coming in. And now you are doing this data enrichment with the data that is usually updated in a batch mode. Yes. The dimension tables are mostly updated in a batch mode.
Yes.
So how do you ensure?
Not necessary. Yeah, but go ahead.
Yeah, but most of the cases, the dimension tables are loaded in the batch mode. That is how I.
Right.
But so what I wanted to ask was.
Now here, that is the advantage of Kafka here. Now you can temporarily stop this particular streaming, but still you will not lose a message. Whenever you try to update anything, there will be to your upstream applications a slight lag because you're trying to modify this, but still you will not lose the records. Because next time when you start this, it tries to read the latest messages from the Kafka.
Yeah, but what I wanted to ask is, how do you ensure that the data that is coming into the real data streams or in the real time is actually getting enriched with the correct level of data that is there in the.
Okay. Now, one thing is very important, Hemant. There will be a lot of automation done as part of this thing. Now, for example, when a product is being deployed, immediately the sign-off will not happen from the customer. We call that as grace period for the customers to evaluate the software. Okay, so when this kind of architecture is purchased from by the customers, and they will not have a quick sign off. So the project will have a kind of a POC stage where customer is trying to evaluate. So when we try to deploy this, what happens? We will have lot of automation test cases written to validate the complete flow. Hemant. So it tries to validate for the once the deployment takes place, it tries to, the test cases is automated in such a way that you try to load a particular kind of a data into the dimension data, and then when you run the source applications, Kafka source connectors, and then check whether the data after enrichment it is going as part of this let's say to the next data warehousing system. All these things, there will be a proper test cases written.
Okay.
And that test
that is what I wanted to.
No problem. I understand the question, but your questions are benefiting everybody. But what I'm trying to tell you is that is how customers will ask you, can you tell me how guarantee that your product works fine? How guarantee that, the entire product, whatever you're trying to show you as analysis is right. So we will have a lot of data quality checks also happening on the data. We'll have a lot of data governance tools which will be built on top of the data to ensure that the data is, is not an invalid. Clear, Hemant?
Yeah, makes sense now.
Right. Okay. Very good.
And one more point I want to make, Hemant.
Yeah.
Our data comes into the Kafka. Kafka locks the messages in a log file. So when update comes, it immediately updates the file also. So you will have the latest data in it.
Okay, right, Vamsi. Okay, let me also proceed now. Any other questions from anybody, guys? Okay, right. I'm sorry, I'm not sure why it is going to the last stage. Yeah. So then please also understand about this now. So now when, when all these things is done as part of this real-time streaming thing, then the data will be moved into the data warehousing systems. Now, if you look into this, when the data moves into the data warehousing systems, please look at this. There is a lot of data movement happening from one table to another. This is a very important. This is what we call it as aggregation pipeline. This is what we call it as aggregation pipeline. So what happens in this aggregation pipeline is, for example, once this data sent to the tables, you can assume it's an external table, Hive external table. So once the data gets into this Hive external table, the records will be inserted, and it will also update the databases like, we have chosen MariaDB to update that this particular source has sent the data till what max time. So that's what is this max value I've given. So at any point of time, the source should know what is the max value I have sent. So let's assume the source has sent at 12 o'clock. This max value gets updated to 12 o'clock. So the next source is trying to send updated data. That updated data will be recorded on particular database. Okay, there's a lot of things happens here. Now just let me explain it, then I'll take up the question. For example, now can you see this? We have a lot of jobs now running. These are all terminologies, what we call it as jobs. Now the data movement has to happen to the usage jobs, and from usage job, data movement has to happen to the hour level jobs, and data movement should happen to the day level jobs. This is what we call it as data pipeline. Now, when this usage job runs, please understand this. When this usage job runs, it is very much required for it to know what was it last run. For example, when this usage job runs, what this usage job does, usage jobs takes the data from this voice to and puts into the usage table. So next time when this usage job runs, it should not take the previous data which was already taken, right? So all this metadata will be stored in the database. One such example, for example, let's assume, the job name. Let's assume the job name is usage. Let's assume the max value of that particular job, initially it was null. That means the job has never run. The job has never run. And now let's say the data keeps accumulating here. Now a usage job is trying to run. Now it sees that it is null. Okay, since it is null, it tries to take the entire data and puts into the usage table by partitioning the data. It will partition the data from this raw data, maybe based on, for example, date, and you can have subpartition based on region, and again subpartition based on city, based on business use cases here. So all the records have been loaded here, and the next time, and it has updated the max value telling that, okay, I have taken the data from this ext table till 12 o'clock. So this has data from 11 to 12 o'clock here, and new data keeps coming. So data got updated to 13. So next time when this usage job runs, it should not take the data from 11. So what it does is it tries to look into a kind of a metadata, which we try to store it into the MariaDB. Okay, next job, it has to run from 12 o'clock. So it tries to take this delta data and tries to load it into different set of partitions. So this jobs, whatever jobs which I'm saying you, this is a job, this is a job, this is a job. All these jobs can be a jobs which is triggered, what I meant is which is scheduled, or it can be a jobs which is auto triggered also. Now I'll not proceed further. Any questions? I'll take up the questions and then I'll proceed. Any single question here? Yeah, Sagar, go ahead.
So what kind of schedulers you were using to schedule the job?
This is very important. Most of the industry try to use the schedulers, whatever I'm trying to tell you. Again, it depends on the company to company what they have to use. Initially, I think nobody uses cron jobs anymore, no doubt about that. But there are popular schedulers like Quartz. It's all licensed. And yeah, you can also use Apache Airflow for this. Depending on scenario. So these are the two popular ones. And again, there are certain schedulers like Azkaban and Uzi and all people don't tend to use. But yeah, it depends on these things. So these are two popular, whoever asked that question.
Okay. And one more thing, the data so the data, what kind of data you are processing? Means it like whatever we speak onto the calls, or they are
I think Sagar, I think you joined late, I guess, right?
Yes, I guess.
So we have already covered all those things at this layer only, Sagar. All those things we already covered at these layers.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's sync up with me later. I will help you out on those questions.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions from anybody, guys? Okay, I think we're already reached time, 6:30. Yeah, any other questions from anybody? Yeah, Bharat, go ahead. Bharat, I think you're on mute. Go ahead. Yeah, Bharat. Bharat, sorry, your voice is not audible. Ankur?
Yeah, like if you are using Spark and all, so how do we optimize the code? Like especially the like project point of view, on the basis of how do you optimize the code for?
Ankur, I'm not telling you anything related to optimization here. The agenda was to explain about the project workflow, Ankur.
Okay, fine.
Okay, optimization, it involves a bigger role. Why? Because, you know, when I talk about optimization, since you mentioned, I'm trying to tell you, optimization is not just at the Spark level. For example, you're trying to use Spark with Yarn. So a lot of optimization comes as part of Yarn. For example, depends on the kind of a scheduler you are using.
Okay.
So for example, you know, it depends on your organization, whether you're using capacity scheduler, or it depends on your organization, whether you're using fair scheduler. So it depends on that layer also. It is not just with Spark.
Okay.
Clear?
In future, if you like, you are doing some workshop, like do on that as well, like especially optimization and all.
Sure, definitely.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, welcome. Yeah, any questions from anybody? Yeah, Ankur, yeah, Hemant, go ahead.
When is the next session?
I think you want me to wind up this session, Hemant?
Not exactly, but yeah, I look forward to it.
Definitely. Still, we have a lot to cover now, Hemant. I think once we cover, I'll tell you about when is my next session. Okay, good to see that. Yeah. Any other questions from anybody, guys? Okay. I see there's no questions. Let me proceed further details about this. Now, if you look into this things here, something up. Hello. Guys, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So here, what I was trying to tell you here is, so you will have different, the data movement happening from one layer to another layer. So when the data movement happens here, there is a lot of things happens here, and you know there can be a lot of enriching the data happening here also. Now, if you look into this terminology here, so you know everybody would be aware of ETL, but you know there is another thing called what companies are moving into something called as ELT. So the traditional approach, what we used to do is we used to extract the data, transform the data, and then load the data. But with the present data lakes and all, what we actually do is we extract the data, load the data, and then do the transformation. So here also there is a lot of enriching, data enrichment happening here. Very important. All these things are project actually. It will give you a very nice when you start doing it. This is what we as NPN training, students do these kind of projects. Yeah, so when data enrichment happen here, can you see this? These dimension data is what is the data which will be loaded maybe from the REST APIs, Hemant. And in the REST APIs, what we load the data is the batch data, Hemant. That means we try to upload a file which is exposed as part of the REST APIs, because you know the some of the product data or the customer dimensions should not access this cluster directly. So we will expose some sort of a REST APIs where we upload data as a batch. Is it clear, Hemant? I think this is what you asked.
Yep.
Right. So we will not load the file directly. We will expose a REST APIs where you can upload a file directly. So again, there we do a lot of security checks, all those things, so that it will help. It will do a lot of things. So again, and finally that, once this, and you will not have these few tables, you will have lots of tables for every use case we keep building. You will have lots and lots of tables keeps adding into the systems. That is very important. I saw that somebody else has requested me, sir, can you show me one real-time data? I also have taken my company's real-time data. I'll be showing you whoever asked that question, so that this is what we generally show you, so that, you will understand. Okay. Now, again, once this layers are finished, like day level, and then from day level, we also have which goes to month level. things like that, then we will have a reporting framework which built. So there are a build, you can either use Tableau. We have built our own reporting framework with the D3JS and applications like Angular and all. So where which tries to this layer exposes lots of REST APIs based on different use cases. So these applications will try to connect to these REST APIs, and based on the filters, whatever you have selected in the application. For example, you are interested in finding out the trend analysis for a particular region, for a particular city, and for a particular technology, let's say 2G, for last 2 months of data. This is the filters what you have selected. So in that case, what happens is, based on that, the request will be formed. Let's say all those things will be converted into a JSON, and then it will be given. A lot of apps would have been installed here, and these apps, based on whatever you have designed, based on whatever filter combinations you have tried to select, it will try to hit that particular the table, and then it tries to retrieve the records, and then we finally render into the UI. So this is how a typical project flow would be. Any single question here? I think we have already reached 6:40. Any single question here? Let me just, yeah. Okay, right. If there's no questions, let me, I've just taken some questions from people who have asked questions and they've mailed me. I've just taken few questions. One person have asked a very good question. Can you show me some sample POCs or this customer bugs what you have encountered? For that, I've just prepared one scenario. Let me demonstrate that. So that also explain you about what is the day-to-day activity, things like that. So this is one of the activity which we found out recently as a customer issue. Okay, I'll just simulate that now so that you will get an exposure. Once again, I'll just show you. Let me open Eclipse. Let us wait for some time, guys. I think it takes a little time to load. Okay, by then let me start my Hadoop services. So this is for people who ask that question. Can you tell me what is the day-to-day activity, or what is the responsibility, or the bug? So 3 questions are combined into one thing so that you will understand. So let me just start all the services related to Hadoop. So this takes some time. Let's wait. One second, guys. I think let it load. Okay, I already imported, but I'm not sure it is asking me to import. Let me just check all the services are up. Yeah, let me start my resources. Okay. Yeah, I think it is importing. Okay, now this is one of the real customer bug what we had encountered, and for us to figure it out, it really took a lot of time because it's a huge volume of data. I'll just show you as a small POC so that you will try to understand. One second, let it load here. Okay, right. Let me just log on to, let me start my Hive Thrift server. Okay, now this is one typical dimension data loading where we figured it out, this issue. Now what this piece of a code does is, it tries to load certain data. Let me show you the data as well so that you'll get an idea. One second, I think my machine is responding a little slow, just bear with me. So I'll just show you the data. So let me just copy the data once again. Okay, I'm not running my application yet. So let me just copy the data which is there in location, which is there in location. Now, if you look into this data set, what I have here, oh, sorry. So let me just view this data location. Look at this. I have some sort of a dimension data here. Let's say Bengaluru, Mysore, and Mangalore. So I have just written some Java code here. Look at this. Understand what kind of a POC is what we would be generally doing, or what kind of a customer bugs we would generally encounter. So if I run this piece of a code, what happens is it simply loads this location data into Hive. Let us see that first. Okay, then I will tell you what was the issue. So let me load this. So ideally, if there's no error, it should load. I've started my Thrift server. The Thrift server has been started. Let us see. Yeah, application takes a little time. I think it'll run. By then, guys, can I get a confirmation that I'm audible, right? Anybody, can you confirm me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, executed test DB query. Okay, I think it is loading. Yeah, I think it got loaded. Let me just go ahead, look into Hive, whether it really got loaded. Let me log into Hive from a different terminal. Okay, let me just check. Okay, I think I'm using npm-db. So let me just switch on to npm-db, and the table, what I'm using is ES location, select star. Sorry. Okay, now if you see this, data successfully got loaded. Once again, let it execute. Yeah, so data got successfully loaded. This is not a bug. Now look at this, the next scenario, what I'm trying to tell you. So for people who ask this question, for example, let me just copy the next file. Let me just copy the next file. Copy to, I'm just copying to the present working directory. I will not view that file. First, let me run this so that you will understand. So now same code I'm trying to execute, but this time, yeah, let me run the same code. So again, it tries to load a new file into the Hive. Let's see what happens here. And this issue, we had seen only one customer issue, that the entire data loading itself was failing and there was no clear logs to identify what that issue was at all. I will tell you what was the issue. And it was happening only at one customer. It took really a lot of time for us to debug, because dimension data will be millions of records, will be one such record because of tampering. I'll show you that it created a lot of effort for us to really identify. Yeah, I think code got executed. So I didn't show you what is there in that file, but let me execute this select start from table name. Now please see what happened here. Can you see this here? All of a sudden, we were able to see some sort of an encoding which your system was not able to understand. It is not about, it is wrong with the file. The file is absolutely valid file. Let me show you the file, but only problem. Guys, everybody understood what is the problem here before I proceed? Can I get a confirmation that everybody understood? One second. Can everybody raise hand if you have understood what was the issue? Please raise hand, guys, so that at least I will know that you have understood what was the issue. Okay, very good. Right, others, I'm waiting for you. If you have not understood, I will help you out again. Right, I see most of you have raised their hand. Right, any questions here before I proceed, guys? Okay, so now you understood what was the issue. This is one real POC what we took a lot of time. Now, if you look into this, a lot of encoding characters have come here. Now, it is not about the dimension data, whatever they have loaded is incorrect, but only thing they have loaded their data in a different encoding. For example, let me show you the data. Let me show you the data. So now if you look into this data, now when I do cat, please look at this, you will not be able to view the data because the file is in a different encoding. Now, now it was very difficult for us, only very few records were given in a different encodings, but when I actually view a file, I view a file, for example, let it open. Now, can you see this? The data is absolutely fine, but only thing they have loaded in there, whatever the ISO encoding or whatever based on their encoding. They have loaded. So the system was not able to handle this kind of an encoding. First of all, when we were doing enriching the data, we didn't even realize that this kind of an encoding comes to the data, and the entire pipeline was failing only for a particular customer. So we almost viewed a file and then there was nothing errors. We were really not able to figure it out why that issue has occurred. Then we did a POC and then we tried solving. Now let me show you that. So let me load the same file again. I'm just loading the same file to the location. Now let me make some change. I've just made some Boolean values here. So I'll just enable that. I will just enable. It's not a simple file encoding here. We have done a lot of, the code actually executes the Python code, and then, it does a lot of things there in the code. So that part of things is actually there in the load data. But anyway, let me execute that. Now I have the file, right? Let me just check whether I have the file. Yeah, I have the file location. This time the code should be able to work in such a way that it should properly identify what is the encoding, and it should properly convert into the UTF encodings, and then only it should actually load. So this is one of the activity what we were doing it recently. Whoever asked me this question, POC and the recent activity. It's a very good question. I appreciate that question. So I think, yeah, can you see this? We have written a lot of Python code there. It is executing the Python code. Yeah, and the data loaded. Let me just go ahead to Hive and let me query now. Now, if you look into this, now can you see this? The data has been properly loaded based on their encoding only. That is the important point. So if you search for Hive properties and all, you have to know the encoding, but the solution, whatever we give, it can be irrespective of encoding they give, we will be able to load successfully. So this is one of the project or one of the POC or one of the recent activities what we were working on. This is one important thing, whoever asked that question, right? Okay, so I just wanted to show that candidate. He called me and then he asked me. So that's the reason I just prepared this for him. So this is what it is. Right, yeah, any single question from anybody? Yeah, Vijay, go ahead.
Actually, I raised it for the one which you asked for the understood the question or not, right? So
oh, okay, fantastic. Good, Vijay. Yeah, Ravi, is it you also same? Okay, I didn't get response. And another person asked me about this. I'm trying to combine because we are shooting out of time. So this production issues, that's what you can take that. If not, I had another use case for me to demonstrate because I don't have a time. Where we'll see in the next sessions we can demonstrate that. Yeah, so this is what is a production issue, and let me show you some real-time data for you so that at least you will get an idea how the data would be. Okay, let me just take the data, just hold on. One second, Ravi, let me just open the data set, whoever asked me that question, because he asked me purposefully. So that let me just finish this. 1 second. Right. So I think everybody is able to see this data set. This is a real data set actually. So what, for example, if you take about, this is a browsing data. So if you look into this browsing data, please look at the fields. This is very important interview question. They ask you, can you tell me some of the fields, what is there in your production? I've seen most of the people who have simply undergone a trainings, they fail to answer what are the real fields. It's very important to know about the real fields and understand about different use cases, what you can build on those data. Now, if you look into this, we have certain fields like, it's very important that any data, what you get in general, you will have event time, report time, and load time, very important. Okay, now you look into this, we have different, this is a browsing data. It has so much of information like when the session has started, when the session has end, and this 101, 102, 103, there will be again a lookup table where we perform to tell you what is 101, whether it is 2G, 3G, 4G, and each device is trying to generate an equip ID. Can you see this here? And it tells you that this particular equip ID is like, it is having what is a client device, whether it is an iPad, Samsung TV, things like that. And can you see there's a lot of data? We don't get the record itself. So we do a null handling for all those things. There is a treatment what we do for that. And look at this, we have client device type, whether it is a handheld, means it's a mobile phone, or it is a PC, or it is a TV, and what is the OS involved as part of when you browse, what is a host, what is the domain you're browsing. And you'll have lots and lots of information. Can you see this here? It will tell you, what is a domain, what is a URL. I've just removed certain fields because it's my company's data. So again, what is the protocol you're using, what is application ID, application name, and which browser you're using. So much information you will have, how many times you're trying to visit within the session, and lot of data here. So lots and lots of data. So in interview, definitely they will expect you to tell about your data. So if you have just learned or very fundamental without knowing about the actual data, trust me, you will fail in clearing interview. One person had actually asked me, who's that I have not put there, about interview preparation. I think we will have a dedicated session for about interview preparation. Yeah, there we will discuss. So can you see this? We have a lot of other columns here. We have lots and lots of almost like 150 columns we have just for one table, and this table will be denormalized table, right? So this is what I add to discuss before we wind it up. Any single questions, guys?
Yeah, actually, usually how much size you guys in production you guys will have?
No, very important that this is a very, very typical question what in general we ask in interviews. Do understand, guys, what is the size you handle depends on various factors. It depends on where the product has been deployed and what kind of use cases customer have purchased and what is the volume of data they get. It depends on various factors. So the straightforward answer for this, Vijay, to be honest, there is no straightforward answer. But if you ask me just at the rough level, a very, very rough level, I can say at least, per day, a particular source may generate somewhere around, 20 to 30 GB of data, being the minimal deployment.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, but actually speaking, there's no straightforward answer for this. Who asked me this question?
Ravi,
please,
yeah.
There's no straightforward answer for this because it depends on so many other factors. So interviewers expect you tell those factors, not the answer.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Yeah, Vamshi. Very good. Yeah, Vamshi.
And what is the mode of deployment in the production?
Okay, this is very important. Whenever we are working on Linux platforms, the packaging unit will always be RPM, Vamshi.
Okay.
So RPMs is what we try to deploy.
Okay.
So RPMs basically it stands for Red Hat Package Managers. That those RPMs will have internally the WAR files or the jar files. So okay. The packaging unit is, I can say it's an RPMs.
Oh, okay. Docker deploymentation.
Again, when you comes to the Docker deployment and all, you will have Helm charts.
Okay.
Which will be packaged as part of the RPMs again.
Okay.
So that architecture, again, it is a different. Actually, we evolved from this architecture to another architecture. I thought I will have time and then I will discuss. Unfortunately, we overshoot at the time. We will see in the next sessions.
Yeah, thanks.
Right. Any other questions, guys? Okay, guys, if there's no questions, I just want to introduce you to the course, what we are offering. So I hope everybody is aware that I am part of NPM training. So I'm the, hello, guys, am I audible?
Yeah.
Right. So I just want to introduce you to the course, what we offer. So I hope everybody knows about my institute, NPM training. So we are there into the big data from past 10 years. So the course, I just want to introduce for the people who are willing to join for a course, because it's very important that you just don't learn the fundamental. The most important thing from a course is you have to understand the real-time knowledge. So we also had a workshop, I'm not sure how many attended, where we spoke about interview preparation, because I see many people requesting me about interview questions and they search in Google or YouTube and they fail to gather the questions, which is actually what we don't ask in interviews. So we also had a session. How many attended that session, guys? Anybody from this batch? Anybody from here who have attended? Okay, right. I see nobody attended. Okay. Okay, now we offer a course, what we call it as Big Data Architect Master's Program. It's a full stack Big Data developer training, wherein we start, from the scratch by building this kind of a real time. And the entire course basically will span for 5 months. Very important. Okay, so let me just run you through the course. Whoever is interested can contact me, and whoever is interested to build these kind of a real-time projects. I've seen many people, calling me that, for the project, they were facing a lot of difficulty in interview because they try to keep a fake project and then they will try to identify. Do remember, guys, we as an experienced people, when you start explaining things, we will easily identify whether you're working or not. What do you feel? What do you feel, guys? Don't you think any experienced person can easily identify whether you're working or you have simply undergone a training? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it is very important, guys. Please do understand it. And I've seen many people say, sir, I've put 4 projects in my resume. Still, I don't get calls. It is not about number of projects. There are so many people who say that 5 projects, 6 projects, 10 projects. In fact, how can a person work on 10 projects if you are really working on an actual project? So that is all unrealistic things. So very important. So that's the reason I'm just showing you this. So this part of the Hadoop ecosystem or the Big Data Architect training, we take you from Hadoop. Very important. Hadoop plays a very fundamental role, and however people says Hadoop is outdated, all those stories, guys, do understand even now in the industry, only outdated component in Hadoop is actually speaking MapReduce, Scoop, and HBase. These are the general 3 things what is outdated in the industry. But people teach, yeah, even I teach some things in the Hadoop ecosystems like MapReduce and Scoop. But during the course, I myself will help you out to give you a clear roadmap, what you have to learn. And yeah, we'll be starting with Hadoop, and then we'll be taking you to the excessive Scala programming. This is a very, I see that many people ask me a question, sir, can you be a Spark developer without learning Scala? Please understand, guys, it is practically not possible at all. You can only learn the course fundamentals, but if you want to get involved yourself in building a real-time data pipeline architecture, do understand it is very important that you have to be good in a programming language. And again, a choice of Scala versus Python, I've seen many people answering either in YouTube or all this training institutes. It's all false there. We don't pick a language like Scala because Spark is built on Scala, and you will get a performance boost up, all those things. It's all theoretical. There's a lot of evaluation we do when we pick a particular language. That's the reason we cover both Scala here, and as well as we'll be covering Python programming. And then we'll take you to the Apache Spark. And an Apache Spark will be, most of the time, we'll be concentrating on Scala, and we'll be doing a project on PySpark as well. And then we'll take you to the Kafka. So this is the order in which you have to learn. That is how you can cruise the course. So we'll take you to the Kafka. And I see many people try to learn how, especially Hadoop and all in a single node cluster like, Cloudera. Most of the people, but it is very important that if you start using the distributing vendor like Cloudera and all, trust me, you will not even know how to start your cluster, because Cloudera comes with a lot of inbuilt things which you start, everything is started. For example, now I started every single thing, every single service, or I started the Thrift server, everything I started from scratch. So when you use a raw virtual machines, what we give it to the students, whatever I showed you, it's a raw virtual machines. So you can play with these virtual machines and you will get a lot of confidence there. So that's why we don't give you Cloudera. We also give you, but we don't recommend the candidate to choose Cloudera. And then once we are done with Kafka, we will take them to the AWS. So in the AWS, we'll be showing candidate how to set up a fully 4-node distributed environment. This is very, very important. However, in companies, we may not get an opportunity to set up a cluster, but it gives you a very good exposure. You have to know how to set up a multi-node cluster on AWS. And in AWS, we will also be showing you the entire industry is migrating not just about using AWS. It is also about how to automate AWS. I will show you that. We'll also be teaching you how to automate AWS, like, how to spawn a cluster, how to move the data to Amazon S3, all those things through, automation by making use of, AWS SDK with Python, about 3 libraries, things like that. And we have put, we will teach the MongoDB here. Very important. So I've put a very detailed curriculum. So we start, can you see this? We have a very, very, very detailed curriculum here. Just spend some time, whoever is interested in, who wants to undergo a real-time training on big data, and not just with the fundamentals. We have put a very, very detailed curriculum here. And in Apache Spark, we have a lot of modules dedicated just for Apache Spark. So where we talk about deploying Spark, or it could be performance tuning of your Spark applications, a very detailed one. And again, a web-based notebooks and, AWS that we teach the automation, like using Boto 3 libraries and AWS SDK Java API. This all is very much required in today's industry if you really want to survive, or if you want to really get a very good jobs on your data engineering field. So again, we teach Kafka, MongoDB, different things like that. So I would request you to just go through this link, whoever is interested in doing the real projects. This link would help you out where we build the projects. Okay, so this would be the reference for you. Just go through npaintraining.com. Okay, and I hope the session was useful. I think the session has been recorded. I will be uploading into the YouTube, guys. Okay, so whoever is not subscribed to my YouTube, kindly go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube. If you just go to youtube.com, just go to NPN Training, you can subscribe. I'll be pushing this recorded video into the YouTube. Any single question here before we wind it up, guys?
Naveen?
Yeah, Hemant, go ahead. I was expecting that you will ask me.
Yeah, you have mentioned a lot of the tools, a lot of the technologies as such, but will you be covering any tools or anything as such which are normally used in your day-to-day?
Hemant, as part of this particular big data architect training, a candidate can choose an elective things. You can either choose Apache NiFi or ELK stack.
Yeah, I mean, those are few tools as such, but then let's say you were talking about these data governance on this.
That all those things is a project, so what people are building, Hemant.
Okay.
Data governance is a project which is built, which at the moment I'm working on is basically a Spark-based application.
Okay, probably I'll talk in a little more detail later on.
Yeah, no problem.
I'll connect with you.
No problem. And whoever is interested in doing only the project, we also offer specialized courses only for the project development, because many people, I see that they would have undergone a course either online or with other sources. If you're looking for real-time projects, yes, we do handle the courses related to the live project training. So each project itself will take almost 2 to 3 months for you to implement. But if you can implement even one single project workflow, trust me, you can easily put at least 3 to 4 years of experience. If you try to target for 3 to 4, at least you can end up with 2. Okay. Okay, that's great. I think I hope the session was useful. At least I gave you the required knowledge, I hope. Right, guys?
Yeah.
Hey, hi, Naveen. Just one thing. This is Ankur here.
Yeah, Ankur, good.
Like, do you have any specific to like language specific like course? Like, I don't want to want to learn the complete architecture and all. Just the basic like language specific like Scala or Python kind of.
No. We don't offer, Ankur.
Okay, it's a complete like course kind of 5 months.
Either if a candidate can choose only Apache Spark training or the complete big data architect training. So if a candidate chooses only Apache Spark, I'll be teaching you Scala there and Python. We have a lot of courses there. You can just have a check there, Ankur.
Okay, fine. Yeah, thank you.
Just go to NPN Training and just have time to check that. But again, for everybody, fundamentals, if you're just stuck up with only the fundamentals, trust me, industry is moving far ahead. So you have to learn. Yeah, Balkrishna.
Yes, Naveen. I have one doubt. This is integrated with the SAP in production department.
No, we have not integrated anything to SAP, Balkrishna.
Okay.
So I will not be a person who, if you ask me about SAP, you're talking about BOS?
SAP, I'm talking about SAP databases. SAP.
Okay, no, we are, no. When I thought SAP, we use business objects, SAP BO.
SAP BO. Now here, I am asking the ECH.
No,
SAP
no,
ECH.
no, Balakrishna.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, I think if there's no questions, I think we'll wind it up. We'll keep conducting workshops very frequently. So if interested, you can always keep in touch with me for any doubts out of the topic, or any guidance, anything you can keep in touch with me. I will help you out so that, you can really put what is really required to put. Okay, guys, I think if there's no questions, I think we'll wind it up then.
Yes, thank you, Naveen.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, see you.
Thank you.
Okay, see you guys.
Hello, Naveen.
Yeah, who's this?
Srinivas here.
Yeah, tell me.
I'm a fresher. I need real-time projects.
Yes, you can contact me, Srinivas. I will help you out on that.
Okay.
It is there in my website. So just go to my website.
Okay.
And then, you have my contact details there. You can call me.
Okay, fine.
Okay, all right. At least you got to get to know the overview, Srinivas, at least of what kind of a projects we will have.
Sorry?
Did you attend the session fully?
You are talking about this session or?
Yes, this session.
Yeah.
Where you were there fully?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Okay, guys, I think we'll wind it up. If there's no questions, we'll catch up.